In a wide-ranging interview on Al Jazeera's Head-to-Head, Ethiopian government minister and advisor Getachew Reda faced rigorous questioning about his political transformation from TPLF spokesman to ally of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. This analysis examines key moments that reveal significant contradiction in Getachew Reda's positions and the challenges of his current role. So let's watch it together.
Yeah, one of the things I knew I had to do was to make sure that my erstwhile friends, my comrades, who for one reason or another, of course that would include myself too, led to the kinds of suffering the people of Tigray had to suffer because of their failure in leadership, should not be allowed to continue to enjoy the kind of totalitarian control over the people of Tigray. So as long as there was a possibility, indeed a likelihood of working closely with the federal government, not to spite the people of Tigray, but to protect the interests of the people of Tigray.
But you're working with the federal government, hold on Getachew, you're working with the federal government that you spent years calling war criminals. You said Abiy Ahmed, and I'm quoting you, perfected genocide into an art form. Do you stand by those genocide accusations, or have you walked them back now that you work with?
Whatever the superlatives there, I know all kinds of crimes were committed in Tigray.
Did Abiy Ahmed carry out a genocide?
I will tell you this, as a lawyer, yeah. I cannot say who did this and that, but the crime was committed in Tigray.
You're a lawyer?
Yeah.
Were you not a lawyer in 2021 when you said Abiy Ahmed has carried out a genocidal campaign?
Yeah, I was a lawyer.
Were you not a lawyer when you said Abiy committed genocide on the people of Tigray?
I was a lawyer, and I was in the heat of a conflict that was claiming the lives of hundreds of thousands of people.
So was it a genocide or not?
I believe genocide has been committed in Tigray.
By Abiy Ahmed?
Well, I have to be responsible for my words now.
So you weren't responsible
And I
before?
am ready to stand by my position that genocide has been committed.
I'm confused. Just to clarify for the audience watching, you still believe it was a genocide,
yes.
But you're not willing to say he did the genocide?
Yes.
It was a genocide that just happened by itself?
No, there were so many actors involved.
Okay.
So what I'm saying is...
Was he one of them?
Well, the war on Tigray was led by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed himself.
So he led the genocide?
I mean, we don't have to be that specific.
We do.
He led the war.
That's why we invited you here, to find out your views.
He led the war.
He led the war.
This exchange exposes the fundamental contradiction at the heart of Getachew Reda's current position. In 2021, while serving as TPLF spokesman, Getachew Reda explicitly stated that Abiy Ahmed perfected genocide into an art form. Today, as a government minister, he maintained that genocide occurred but carefully avoid directly attributing responsibility to his current employer. This represents a critical credibility problem. Getachew Reda's legal background makes his semantic evasion particularly noticeable. He invokes his status as a lawyer to justify not naming perpetrators. Yet, he had no such hesitation during the conflict itself. His explanation that he was speaking in the heat of conflict suggests his previous accusations may have been politically motivated rather than based on careful legal analysis. This issue is not merely rhetorical. If Getachew Reda genuinely believes genocide occurred and knows who orchestrated it, his decision to join that government raises profound ethical questions. Conversely, if his wartime accusations were exaggerated for propaganda purposes, it undermines the credibility of all statements during that period. Political pragmatism may explain his current caution. He cannot effectively serve in government while publicly accusing the Prime Minister of genocide. However, pragmatism typically requires demonstrable results to justify moral compromise. As we will see throughout this interview, Getachew Reda struggles to point to concrete achievement that would validate his approach. The transformation from equivocal accuser to careful diplomat reveals the challenge faced by opposition figures who transition into government roles, particularly in post-conflict contexts where accountability remains unresolved. Now let's take a look again.
How can Tigrayans possibly believe that you are working in their best interest when you're meeting one of the men who's responsible for them having lost their land.
Is that unheard of elsewhere? If you are interested in resolving this crisis, you have to deal with people who are in charge now. I believe the federal government needs to dismantle any Amhara administration in occupied areas in Western Tigray and other parts of Tigray that are still occupied by the Amhara. And if I have to make sure that the people have their opportunity to come back home, you have to work with the federal government and work with people.
This is the problem, Getachew. You seem to change your tune. You have to change your tune.
No. I have to swallow my pride.
Not just swallow your pride. You're changing your very view of the world. This is what you said a year ago.
No. I'm not.
This is what you said.
Anyone.
This is what you said a year ago. It would be very foolhardy for us to expect internally displaced persons to enter when the very people who caused their displacement in the first place are still roaming the very streets we saw in the carnage. You're sitting down with those people.
This is one of the agreements we have with the federal government when I was head of the interim administration, is for that Amhara administration to be dismantled and for security to be taken care of by the federal government, along with traditional militia and police institutions that had been there before the war. And I haven't changed my position.
Okay.
Demakazodu should not be in the business of administering that area, but if I have to create the ground for the return of IDPs with the federal government, and have to continue to work with people like him.
Many Tigrayans, you know this, see you as a traitor. Thousands of people in Tigray went to the battlefield and they died. They were killed in war based on your call to arms. You urged young Tigrayans to, quote, rise and deploy to battle in tens of thousands. What do you say to the people of Tigray today who were victims of the war and who now think you betrayed them by joining the architect of their suffering, Abiy Ahmed?
There are two things here. That Tigrayans had to come out en masse to defend themselves was the right thing to do. That I had to call on them to rise up to defend themselves was the right thing to do. But that, as member of the leadership, we have failed them miserably. That I will carry to my grave.
This segment reveals the central weakness in Getachew Reda's pragmatism defense, the absence of tangible results. The Pretoria Agreement, signed in November 2022, contained specific provisions for justice, accountability, and the return of displaced persons. 3 years later, none of these commitments have been substantially fulfilled. Getachew's justification that one must deal with people in charge to resolve crisis is diplomatically sound in principle. Negotiation often requires engaging with adversaries, of course. However, there is a categorical difference between negotiating with opponents and joining their government. Nelson Mandela, for instance, negotiated with South Africa's apartheid regime. He did not become a minister within it before transformation occurred. The contradiction between Getachew's 2023 statement that IDP returns would be foolhardy while perpetrators remain in power, and his current collaboration with those the same figures is stark. His explanation that he must swallow his pride mischaracterizes the issue. This is not about personal pride, but about fundamental principles, whether ethnic cleansing is acceptable, whether justice matters, and whether political expediency justifies abandoning commitment to victims. Here, editor Sadala Lemma's intervention is particularly devastating because it addresses the outcome question directly. If pragmatic compromise is justified by practical gains, where are these gains? The federal government has not compensated victims, has not persecuted perpetrators, has not facilitated meaningful reintegration of Tigray, and critically continues to support administrations in Western Tigray accused of ongoing ethnic cleansing. Getachew's position would be defensible if he could point to incremental progress, partial compensation, preliminary investigation, some repatriation of displaced persons. The complete absence of such achievements suggests either that his role lacks influence or that the government has no genuine commitment to these objectives. Either conclusions determines the rationale for his participation. So let's continue.
Domestic accountability has never happened in modern history in Ethiopia. And there were several international initiatives that were started and then ended because of the federal government's involvement internationally. The AU is one example, the United Nations was another. And then this was replaced by the domestic mechanism that we still haven't seen any prospects from. And so I'm asking, as someone who was working at Amnesty International during the conflict, looking and working with the victims of that conflict was one of the most heartbreaking experiences of my life. You were there in person. What do you say to those people now in terms of the future of their justice accountability prospects?
Okay.
Well, I would say the very nature of the war, especially when it comes to Tigray, is such that just domestic responsibility alone would not be able to take care of the issue of justice and accountability. There were all sorts of assortment of groups that were involved in the crimes, and to just assume that transitional justice that only takes into account, assuming that it's going to be implemented, will take care of all the crimes.
There was an African Union Commission, there was a UN Commission. The Ethiopian government lobbied to have them shut down.
Well, I cannot speak for the government because this happened while I was arguing against it. What I'm saying is there needs to be...
You would like to see those commissions still around?
And there needs to be an international component to the quest for justice.
There was. And the guy you work for lobbied to shut it down.
Okay, I'm not going to cry over spilt milk. What I'm saying is, now that you don't have those institutions, we need to have an international component.
So what are you calling for? What is that? Are you calling for an international tribunal, international investigation? What are you calling for?
I don't have the specifics, but yeah, some kind of tribunal. Yeah, that involves, of course, the involvement of that involves international actors.
Because is that your personal view or is that the government's view?
That's my view. I am an advisor. I'm not a policymaker. This is the same advice I would proffer to the government. Because I'm saying there needs to be an international component because the crimes involved international actors as well.
Got shut down.
Well, this exchange crystallized the incoherency of Getachew's position. He advocates for international accountability mechanisms while serving in a government that actively lobbied to dismantle those exact mechanisms. The African Union Commission of Inquiry and the United Nations investigation were both terminated due to Ethiopian government pressure. Pressure applied while Getachew served in various government capacities. His distinction between personal views and government policy is particularly problematic. An advisor's role is presumably to influence policy. If Getachew believes international accountability is necessary but cannot persuade the government to accept it, this raises question about either his effectiveness or his genuine commitment to the position. More troubling is his agreement with Professor Tronvol's assessment that we have no evidence whatsoever of government accountability efforts. Getachew simultaneously acknowledged the complete absence of progress while defending his continued participation in that government. This is not pragmatic engagement, it is participation in the obstruction of justice. The testimony from the former Amnesty International workers adds crucial context. She worked directly with victims and describes the experience as heartbreaking. Getachew was present during the conflict. He knows the scale of suffering, yet his response offers no concrete plan, no timeline, no specific advocacy, only a vague aspiration for international mechanism that his government opposes. The broader pattern is clear. Getachew articulates positions that would be popular with Tigrayan audience, such as international accountability, justice for victims, dismantling of occupation administration, while acknowledging that none of these positions are being implemented by the government he served. This allows him to maintain rhetorical alignment with victim communities while taking no meaningful action on their behalf. In post-conflict context, accountability is not merely a legal abstraction. It is essential for reconciliation, deterrence of future atrocities, and restoration of trust in governance. Getachew's inability to advance accountability while serving in government suggests he is providing legitimacy to a system that actively resists it.
Said that he was divinely ordained to rule, that his mother had a vision that he would be the seventh king
said that, right?
to unite Ethiopia. An advisor of his said Abiy believes he is God anointed. Has he said that to you? Does he tell you that he's the king?
No, he said it in public. He said it in parliament, right?
Did he say it to you?
No, he didn't say it to me. As a matter of fact, he was a very close friend even before he got elected. So, but
who was
what
a close
he said,
friend?
Abiy was my close friend.
You hated him. You said he was a genocidal warmonger, imperialist.
Yeah, but
Weird friends you have.
that doesn't change the fact that we're friends.
The fact that he's a genocidal warmonger didn't change the fact that you were friends.
No. I'm stating the fact.
Before the genocide,
yes.
You mean you were friends?
Yes.
And after the genocide, you were friends? Just during the genocide, you weren't friends?
We were fighting each other. We're at each other's
yes,
throats.
and thousands of people.
No. I mean, let's not belittle the whole idea of this genocide, whatever. What
I'm
saying
not the
is,
one belittling you. You're the one who said you used to be friends with the guy you accused of being
No. He
genocidal.
didn't tell me personally that he was a messiah or anything.
Do you believe he's a messiah?
He said his mother told him he would once be a king.
Do you believe Abiy was chosen by God to rule Ethiopia?
I don't.
You don't?
I don't.
Have you told him that?
I don't have to tell him.
I mean, you kind of do. He thinks he is, and you're his advisor. Advisors normally give advice.
I don't believe God has a specific choices or whatever to lead. As long as you think you can lead the country and you prove your mettle, you can be leader.
Has he proved his mettle?
He has yet to prove his mettle.
He's been in office for several years. He's still yet to prove his mettle.
This is my position. Okay. I'm not in the business of settling accounts on his behalf. I'm not in the business of.
And if he watches this interview and he sees his advisor saying he's yet to prove his mettle and he may be guilty of genocide, do you think he'll fire you or keep you on?
I honestly am not. I don't really care what happens as a result of that. But I have reason to believe that saying those things in public does not necessarily lead to the kinds of consequences. But like I said, I don't care what happens.
I live in a country where the leader thinks he's also a king.
This revelation fundamentally recontextualized Getachew's entire narrative. The disclosure that he and Abiy Ahmed were very close friends before and during and after the Tigray conflict transforms our understanding of his wartime accusations and current collaborations. If the relationship was always fundamentally friendly despite the war, several disturbing possibilities emerge. First, Getachew's genocide accusation may have been performative, political rhetoric designed for wartime consumption rather than sincere legal or moral judgments. Second, if he genuinely believed his friend committed genocide yet maintained the friendship, it suggests an extraordinary capacity to separate personal relationships from moral judgment about mass atrocities. Neither interpretation reflects well on Getachew's credibility. Politicians are expected to make difficult choices and form uncomfortable alliances, but maintaining friendship through alleged genocide strains credibility. It suggests either the accusations were insincere or friendship is ethically indefensible. His admission that Abiy has yet to prove his mettle after several years in office is equally remarkable. An advisor publicly stating that his principal has not proven himself would typically be ground for dismissal in most governments. That Getachew feels comfortable making this statement suggests either unusual tolerance from Abiy or an understanding that Getachew's role is more symbolic than substantive. The "I don't care" regarding potential consequences reveals either genuine independence or performative defiance. If Getachew truly doesn't care about maintaining his position, it raises questions about why he accepted it in the first place, particularly given the moral compromises it required. This segment inadvertently exposes the transactional nature of Ethiopian elites' politics. Personal relationships and factional loyalties often supersede ideological commitment or accountability for atrocities. Getachew and Abiy's ability to maintain friendship despite leading opposing sides in a devastating conflict suggests both may view political violence as instrumental rather than deeply principled. For victims of the Tigray conflict, this revelation is likely deeply troubling. It suggests their suffering was contextualized by leaders on both sides as part of political maneuvering rather than a fundamental moral catastrophe requiring justice. So let's continue.
That Tigrayans had to come out en masse to defend themselves was the right thing to do. That I had to call on them to rise up to defend themselves was the right thing to do. But that as member of the leadership, we have failed them miserably. That I will carry to my grave is I am part of the blame. And the reason why I am trying to do what I am doing right now is to make sure that not only I atone for the kinds of mistakes we have done, but also I have to do everything in my power to make sure that that sort of miscalculation will never happen again. And the thousands of youngsters who paid their lives, that could have been avoided if we were insightful enough as the leaders. Okay. Doesn't happen again.
You used to be against that back in the day?
Well, I'm still against any such move against opposition leaders.
Well, you were an advisor to the Prime Minister. Have you asked him to release some of these journalists and politicians?
Well, you give me a list and I definitely will do that, believe me.
I'll read to you from the Committee to Protect Journalists from August. Okay. Ethiopian journalists were abducted by masked men. 2 others were detained. We are alarmed by the abduction of Ethiopian newspaper editor Jonas Amari, the arbitrary detention of journalist Qadr Mohammed Ismail, the incommunicado detention of radio host Abdul Samed Mohammed. I can keep going. Should they be released?
They should be released, yeah.
Well, I mean, telling me that's great, but I'm not the Prime Minister of Ethiopia.
Well, I don't exactly know what the allegations against them are.
Why don't you find out?
I once was the information minister. I had been dealing with such kinds of issues. And I don't believe that detaining journalists for their professional work is acceptable.
What about the federal MP Christian Tadale, who was taken last year, detained? He's now very ill in prison. His family are very worried about him. He's a member of parliament.
He should have his day in court. Anyone who is accused of any crime should have their day in court, and they should be treated decently.
Getachew, next year Ethiopia will hold a federal election. You've started this new party, as we heard earlier, Simrit. You've been in Ethiopian politics for almost 2 decades. Like a lot of other Ethiopian politicians, you've promised a lot of change, haven't delivered that change, as we've discussed tonight. Isn't the best path for peace and stability in Ethiopia, for people like yourself and Abiy, who've been around for a while, to just retire from politics and let a new, untainted generation take the reins?
I can only speak for myself at this point in time. You are right about me and my colleagues to have to leave the scene and hand over to whoever is capable of understanding the situation on the ground and resolving issues without being tainted by whatever ugly past we have.
Why did you just found a new political party?
Let's just say I had to lend credibility, whatever support I have in Tigray, I need to lend that to the party. And rest assured, I will not be running for any specific office.
Well, Getachew's acknowledgement that the TPLF leadership failed miserably is one of his more honest moments. Thousands died based partly on his calls to arms, and the strategic calculation that led to war proved catastrophic. His stated motivation for current work, atonement, and preventing future miscalculation would be admirable if accompanied by evidence of effectiveness. However, the journalist release exchange reveals the performative nature of much of his advocacy. When asked if he's requested their release, his response, "Give me a list," comes immediately after being provided specific names and cases. This suggests either he has no intention of following through or he lacks the access and influence he implies. The pattern throughout the interview is consistent. Getachew articulates position that aligns with justice and accountability, such as journalists should be released, IDPs should be returned, international tribunals are needed, war criminals should be persecuted, while acknowledging these positions are not government policy and showing no evidence of actively advancing them. His final exchange is particularly revealing. When confronted with the argument that his generation has failed and should step aside, he agrees, then immediately qualifies his continued political involvement as leading credibility to new moment while promising not to seek office himself. This distinction without difference allows him to remain politically active while claiming to embrace generational transition. The broader question this interview raises is, what is Getachew Reda's actual function? If he's not making policy, not influencing the prime minister on key issues, not achieving concrete results for Tigrayan victims, and acknowledging that accountability mechanisms have failed, what purpose does his participation serve? The most charitable interpretation is that he genuinely believed insider engagement offers the best path to eventual progress, even if results are not yet visible. The less charitable interpretation is that he has prioritized political survival and personal positioning over the commitment he made during the conflict. So, in conclusion, Getachew Reda's interview revealed the profound challenges facing political figures attempting to transition from opposition to government in post-conflict Ethiopia. His positions are marked by significant contradictions, maintaining that genocide occurred while working for the alleged perpetrator and calling for accountability while serving a government that blocks it, advocating for victim justice while achieving no concrete results. The revelation of his long-standing friendship with Abiy Ahmed fundamentally undermined the narrative of a principled, open and reluctantly engaging with a former enemy. And instead, it suggests a more transactional political relationship where wartime rhetoric gave way to post-conflict collaboration with surprising ease. Getachew Reda's defense rests on pragmatism, the argument that engagement with power is necessary to achieve change. However, pragmatism must be judged by results. After years in various government positions, he cannot point to a meaningful achievement in justice, accountability, reintegration, or even the release of jailed journalists. For the victim of Ethiopia's Tigray conflict, those who lost family members, those who were displaced from their homes and continue to await justice, this interview offered little assurance. The former spokesman now serves in a government he admits has provided no accountability while maintaining that he is working toward goals his own government opposes. This interview ultimately raises a question applicable beyond Ethiopia. At what point does pragmatic engagement in an unjust system become complicit with that system? Getachew Reda appears to have crossed that line, providing legitimacy to a government while achieving insufficient results to justify the moral compromise required. As for the journalist Mehdi Hasan's questioning was exemplary persistence, well-researched and unwilling to accept evasive answers. His use of Getachew's own priori statement to highlight contradiction was particularly effective. The key takeaway here is that political figures who transition from opposition to government in post-conflict setting must demonstrate a concrete achievement to justify moral compromises. Rhetoric about pragmatism and engagement rings hollow without tangible results for victims seeking justice and accountability. Thanks so much for watching. This has been African Decode. I'm Babudang. Please have a good time.